Thanks for having me. I get the pleasure of talking about everybody's favorite topic. Now I know biosecurity may be scary to some of you. Maybe some of you have been dealing with it for years already. But my goal today is to create some awareness, maybe create some conversations, and get you thinking about what you can maybe do on your farms for biosecurity. So biosecurity is defined as a series of management practices that are designed to prevent, minimize, and control the introduction and spread of plant pests. So basically, we don't want to take anything from our farm and give it to somebody else, and we don't want somebody else's stuff coming to our farm. Some of you in the livestock industry have probably been dealing with biosecurity for many years, but this is relatively new for grain and oil seeds. And when we talk about plant pests, a lot of times when we talk about biosecurity, we're thinking of just one particular pest. But biosecurity can really help us out with a few different things. So we're going to talk a little bit about weeds, invasive, noxious, prohibited weeds, or herbicide-resistant weeds. Biosecurity can also help with insects, in particular weevils, which are not native to Saskatchewan, or things like the spotted wing Drosophila, which is a fruit fly that damages soft-bodied fruits. It's found in BC and Ontario, and Saskatchewan is going to be monitoring for it this year. And then crop diseases as well. So something like Aphanomyces, which is found in peas and lentils, and a fairly devastating disease found in high levels in those crops. But the one that has kind of sparked all of this conversation is clubroot, and that's where I'm going to spend a lot more time talking about today. So, really quickly, we do have some noxious weeds to be watching out for. This is definitely not all of them, but I just wanted to give you a little snapshot of some things that we can be looking for. So all of these weeds are long-lived perennials that reproduce by seed and creeping roots. Now, absinthe can produce up to 50,000 seeds per plant. Canada thistle produces over 40,000 seeds per plant. And something like leafy spurge, each flowering stem can produce up to 140 seeds per year. And these seeds will remain viable for 8 years, but most will germinate within 2. And so these seed capsules will burst, sending seeds up to 16 feet from the parent plant. And these seeds will stick to shoes or tires. They can float in water and spread that way as well. So again, not all of the weeds that you should be looking out for, but just a snapshot into what we can look for in the area. So herbicide-resistant kochia is kind of an issue. Maybe it wasn't a few years ago, but it sure is now. It's actually very difficult to find kochia that is not resistant to group 2s now. This map is from a glyphosate resistant kochia survey, but it's fairly safe to say that most of the kochia that was found is resistant to both. And we don't particularly want to have glyphosate-resistant kochia on our farms. This weed grows rapidly, it's very competitive, fairly tolerant to just about anything we can throw at it, and quite the prolific seed producer, up to 30,000 seeds per plant or 64 bushels an acre. So it would be great if we could find a way to sell that. And because it is that tumbleweed, it is very good at dispersing its seeds.
Do you have anything on like the lifespan of those seeds? Like absinthe, I think it was like 50,000 seeds. Like, so then, because it's producing so much, is it, are they typically?
I don't have it handy,
Yeah. No,
but I'm sure that it is out there. Yeah. So this is kind of what we've all been talking about all winter long. So clubroot is a long-lived soil-borne disease. It overwinters in the soil as long-lived hardy resting spores. Now these spores can survive for up to 20 years, but have been documented to have a half-life of 2 to 5 years. Clubroot will infect all brassica crops and weeds. So canola, mustard, camelina, stinkweed, flaxweed, wild mustard, and then our vegetable crops as well. Cauliflower, broccoli, kale. And root infection of the host plant by the clubroot pathogen causes swelling of the plant tissue. And that's what gives us the galls that we can see on the plant roots. And these roots, or these galls, will restrict the plant's ability to uptake water and nutrients from the soil, giving us yield loss. Now, the bigger the gall we see, the more yield loss we see. And in some extreme cases, we can see up to 100% yield loss. Now, this disease will favor warm, moist soils. And it does favor acidic soil, so a pH of 5 to 6.5. But if we see high pathogen levels and we see environmental conditions that would favor disease, pH isn't going to have much of an effect. So up until now, clubroot has been confirmed in 43 commercial canola fields. In 2018, the Ministry of Agriculture partnered with Saskatchewan and SARM to conduct a fairly extensive clubroot survey. 1,500 fields were sampled. In the gray area, sorry if I'm in anybody's way there, and this gray area is kind of the areas that are in close proximity to where clubroot has been confirmed in other provinces, areas where there's a lot of canola, or areas where if we had the right environmental conditions, we may see a lot of disease or high disease severity. So in the blue RMs, that's where the clubroot pathogen has been detected. So we haven't seen visible symptoms, but the pathogen is there, it's in the soil. The yellow is where there have been 1 to 9 fields found in that RM, or the orange where there's more than 10 fields. This map is designed to be a regional assessment of risk. So just because an RM is not highlighted on that map doesn't mean that clubroot doesn't exist there. We just haven't found it. So know that we're not in the clear here around Outlook. We didn't have the official survey come through the area, but I did survey a few fields. It hasn't been confirmed, but again, that doesn't mean that it's not here. We are in a much higher risk, at a much higher risk for clubroot in the area, mainly because of irrigation. So it's leaving our soils wetter for longer. And also, the great thing about irrigation is we have different crops that we can grow. But some of those crops leave us at a little bit of a higher risk as well. So corn, beans, potatoes, some of these will need more field operations, more tillage, and custom operators coming in. And as well with potatoes, there is a risk with earth tag. Now, photo A, each of these red rectangles is a plant cell. Inside these plant cells are clubroot spores. In Saskatchewan, our spore levels range from 1,000 to 68 million spores per gram of soil. So those are, 68 million is very high. That's maybe what Alberta would be seeing. And clubroot can spread any way that soil moves, by wind, by water, on equipment or vehicles, on footwear, by animals. So that's why it's very important that we are talking about limiting soil movement when we talk about clubroot. And when we talk about limiting soil movement, that's when we start talking about prevention, when we start really get into the biosecurity conversation, and we talk about sanitation. Now we have 3 main levels of sanitation that we talk about. A rough clean, so scraping, brushing, or blowing crop debris or soil off of equipment. Fine cleaning, using that pressure washer or compressed air to remove anything else. Or that 3rd level, disinfection, using a 2% sodium hypochlorite solution for at least 20 to 30 minutes. We understand that the highest level of sanitation isn't always going to be practical. On your farm, likely what's going to be the most practical for you to use is that rough or fine clean. But know that you may have to use disinfection if your risk goes up. So our risk will increase if clubroot has been confirmed in at least one field on the farm, if fields are muddy or wet, or if equipment or custom operators come from an area with clubroot, or you're not really sure where they're coming from. But there are some small wins that we can consider with sanitation. So knocking the soil off of your equipment. Take as much time as you can. Know that doing something is better than doing nothing. Also, if the amount of soil that you knock off of your equipment is directly related to the amount of risk that you're reducing. So if you take off 80% of the soil from your equipment, you're removing 80% of the risk right there. You can also think about limiting access to unauthorized vehicles. Post no trespassing signs. And talk openly about biosecurity, whether that's with your neighbors or your agronomist or somebody coming to do custom work on your land. Clubroot is a declared pest under the Pest Control Act. So this act states that every person shall take measures to destroy, control, and prevent the spread of all pests on any land. So look at your rental agreements and ensure proper biosecurity protocols are being followed by anybody renting or contractors. And please ask those that are entering your land for their biosecurity protocols. Don't be scared to ask. If it's somebody with SaskPower or SaskTel, please ask them. We all have a responsibility to prevent the spread of weeds, insects, and diseases under provincial legislation. And we do have pest control officers with the RMs and the plant health officers with SARM that can help us out with this. So, some management practices that maybe some of you are already doing, or some things that we can consider implementing right away. So monitor the purity of the crop inputs. Know if your seed is weed or disease free. Manage equipment movement and sanitize new equipment. Use the right variety on the right field and use crop rotation. So if you need to use a clubroot resistant variety, please do so. And make sure that you are scouting your own fields for pests. So of these 43 fields that were confirmed, that was from 2017 and 2018. Only a couple of them were actually identified through our survey. So the rest of those fields were reported externally by producers and agronomists who found clubroot on their farms. So we know clubroot is still out there in areas where we haven't found it. So it's very important that we're looking. Be careful with the storage, handling, and transport of your grain. Consider grassing the entrance and perimeters of the field so that soil is not moving and so that you also have a place to clean off your equipment. And reduce soil movement any way that you can. So using cover crops not going into the field when it's wet, anything you can think of. Control weeds and volunteer crops. So clubroot can still be found on brassica weeds, and not just in canola years. It can be found at any time. So if you are growing corn and you have volunteer canola, you can scout for clubroot. You'll still see the galls on those weeds. And then if you have to bring in feed from other areas, be aware of where that feed is coming from, and if there are weeds, brassica weeds present. Sometimes the clubroot galls can be uprooted as the crop is cut, and clubroot can be moved around that way. It's still okay to use as feed, but if you think that you're at risk, or you know that you're at risk, try feed in a pen or somewhere where the ground won't be cultivated after. And in addition, don't spread the manure on cultivated land as well, because animals will not break down the clubroot spores. If you have clubroot on your farm, or you have a field that is higher risk, access that field last, so seed it, spray it, harvest it last. And then again, don't be afraid to talk about it. We need to be having open conversations, disclosing if you're going to be selling your land, if clubroot is present there, or asking if you're buying it, if clubroot is present. Talk to your agronomist. If you see something that is suspicious, please talk to somebody. It's best to talk to somebody. Don't try to hide it, because it will only get worse. The best way that we can manage this now is to prevent the spread and movement of the disease and keep the pathogen at low levels. So. Sarah and Barb provided me with some of the information for you. And if you would like more information, there's a lot that can be found on our website. Or you can follow the ministry on social media. And if anybody has questions, I'd be happy to try and take them. I know this is really not a corn topic, but it is very important for the area, so.
Yeah, so is this just a canola problem?
Canola, mustard, camelina.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not the elephant in the room, the cover crops or polycrops that we're talking about now, which one of the 4 functional groups are brassicas?
Maybe not the best thing, although they will prevent the movement of soil too. So I guess it depends on where you are and how risky it is. But one of the best ways for us to keep the pathogen levels low with clubroot is to use a 3-year crop rotation or 2-year break between susceptible crops. So.
There is some perennial ryegrass that we did actually helps to prevent, like, it kind of, what happened, like there's 2 infection levels, and so it stopped, like it gets the first infection level, but it doesn't get the second infection level that really exacerbates the problem. So it kind of starts the disease cycle and then cuts it off at the knees. So if you're able to, like, if there's some of the grasses, I don't know all of them, but.
A sod forming grass is really what we
Yeah.
would recommend. So.
Yeah, so if you're looking at some of these different cover crops, that's something too.
Kaeley, I guess I have a bit of maybe a loaded question for you. You said 43 fields were identified in the survey. So was there much talk or speculation amongst those producers as to what may have introduced clubroot to those fields in those situations?
Not that we've heard, or not that I've been told. Again, when we go back and look at this map, these are areas where there is a lot of canola grown. Some of these areas have oil and gas. Some of these areas are close to the border where clubroot has been found. when we were looking in the field, our protocol said to go into the field entrance because 90% of the time that's where covert will be found. But after the survey this year, we also found that it's in low-lying areas, in water runs, in old yards, and a lot of times it does just come in off the highway too. So on clean equipment or anything coming down the highway that was maybe in an area that had covert.
Any other questions? No, I think it was a very relevant topic for the corn meeting. You know, we look at corn growers and, you know, they rely on a lot of custom operators, whether it's a planter, whether it's, you know, somebody putting up silage. You look at that map, you look at the area north of Saskatoon, we know there's a lot of corn produced in that dairy belt area, and you know, that same equipment's coming out here too to put up silage. So with that, I guess, thank you, Kaeley, for the presentation.